Appreciate everyone's time today. It's great to meet up once again with Katie and Rocky. Thank you for everyone that's joined us today. My name is Scott Huxley, Managing Principal of Syscom and Ladder Lehigh Business Technology as well, technology company. And it's our pleasure today to shine some light onto the mystery that's the cloud and some of the ways that you can, as we've said in our social media broadcast, kind of cover your SaaS in a very polite way. But with no further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Katie and also Rocky. How are you guys doing today?
Absolutely, Scott. Goodness, super excited to be here today. Like we were chatting about prior to the webinar, we're seeing the sun shining, so no reason to complain, but excited to jump into the topic that we have. I think really talking about protecting our businesses through the different avenues of backup and the way that that could bring value to an organization. It's just one of those topics that makes sense for the business landscape right now. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for those that are joining, looking forward to sharing some value with you and sharing some insight and really how you can protect yourself whilst using the cloud at the same time, because it has a lot of power. There's a lot you can do with it, but today's about really how we can understand on hidden risk and how we can help you alleviate that just with some simple steps and information and education, which is why we're here today.
100%. And just to build on top of that, we truly want this webinar to be educational. So before I get into my first slide and jump into things, there's some key highlights and takeaways from today's presentation that I want to bring awareness to. And Scott, you hit most of them on the head already. Cloud backup and storage helps businesses keep valuable information and data sets safe and organized across their entire organization. It truly can save you time, money, and hassle, especially as things like cyber attack rates are steadily increasing. Cloud backups can also be a saving grace if your network is hacked or you go through something like ransomware. And many organizations now are choosing cloud-based platforms over the physical disaster recovery sites due to, again, cost effectiveness, flexibility, and on-demand scalability that these different solutions can provide. Now, just kind of hopping into things, why do we need cloud backup if I'm in the cloud? Today companies have technical advantages that weren't easily available 20 or even 10 years ago, and that's all because of the power of the cloud. Easily storing data remotely allows employees to access information from really anywhere, which can be useful for companies with multiple locations or even staff working remotely. It also allows you to forego investing in actual hardware, since there are no limits to the amount of information that you can store in the cloud. You can free up building space for other needs and reduce cost for maintenance and even security for those locations. Clouds can provide added security too. If you lose data in one location because of a disaster, maybe something like a hurricane, a tornado, a large storm that comes through, cloud backups can help you recover faster than you could if you had to repair or replace your physical hardware. Cloud backup technology, it's a smart solution for businesses that are really serious about efficiency and growth within their organization. Cloud backups, they can provide needed redundancy in lines of security and are more efficient than your traditional external backups that, again, can be lost or easily damaged and that are tied to that one physical location itself. Now, goodness, when we think of things that are going into our cloud or what our businesses are moving towards, which we'll get into here a little bit later on in the presentation, today's businesses are using more of these software as a service applications or cloud applications than ever. When we think about it, we have things like our CRMs. It could be something like Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever you may be using. Then you also have things like SharePoint, Teams, Google Workspace, and the applications that are a part of that. And as more companies' data is stored outside of things like your firewall, it becomes ever more possible and even likely that that data can be lost. According to the folks at the Arboretum Research Group, as many as 1 in 3 businesses have experienced permanent loss of their SaaS data, with the majority being caused by things like human error, malicious intent, that could be something like a cyber criminal or a data breach, and then, of course, sync errors, those dreaded sync errors that occur when we least expect them to. And while these figures refer to small to medium-sized businesses, it's clear that data loss isn't something that discriminates. Many larger organizations and mid-level organizations and businesses have also experienced similar headaches when it comes to keeping their data safe. So unfortunately, no one is the exception when it comes to losing some of that data. And one story I always like to bring up is we've all probably heard of the Alzheimer's Association and the awesome work that they do in trying to eradicate the terrible disease. The charity has just around 3,000 employees and volunteers working to enhance their care, support, and advancing the research that they do. As with any large organization, an element of staff turnover is inevitable. And the Alzheimer's Association faced a problem when one departing employee deleted all of his emails on his way out the door. Whether this was an attempt to be helpful or to erase personal emails he didn't want others in the organization to access, it had dire consequences for that organization. Amongst the deleted emails were messages that were critical to major fundraising initiatives that they had been working on. And needless to say, losing that kind of data within a nonprofit organization can have a catastrophic consequence, especially since charity organizations, they have so much to do with so few resources that they are working with. So again, businesses can lose their SaaS data in a lot of different ways, again, including the intentional deletion of emails. Now, when we think about our data, one thing that we have to consider is just the landscape that we're working with. Telecommuting, it was once a rarity, now it's a necessity. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced traditional brick and mortar businesses, of course, to move to the telecommuting structure in order to maintain business continuity. Although working from home is not a new concept, for many teams and companies, it is a first-time experience. And now, more than ever, organizations are relying on SaaS applications like, again, Google Workspace, Office 365, applications like Salesforce to help our dispersed employees work as a united workforce. And unfortunately, because of this, adoption of these new platforms, the hackers never let a good crisis go to waste. In the number of rise in first-time telecommuters around the globe, again, it's a golden opportunity for the hackers, the cyber criminals to target our applications, to target our credentials. That's going to put our data at risk, whether they mean to or not at the end of the day. And just kind of continuing on the topic, Microsoft 365, they saw a surge in popularity because of things like the COVID-19 pandemic and the remote workforce. And because remote work is here to stay, again, that has led to the massive spike in adoption of cloud technologies, particularly in the small to medium-sized business space. Before cloud computing came into existence, companies were required to, download applications or programs on their physical PCs or on-premise servers to be able to use them. For organizations, building and managing its own IT infrastructure or data centers is a huge and costly challenge. So they turn to IT providers and managed service providers for help. And for those who even have their own data centers, allocating a large number of IT administrators and resources, it's no easy task to manage. And due to the easy accessibility, integration, flexibility, security, and ease of use, cloud-based tools such as Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace have become the obvious choice for businesses looking to collaborate both internally across departments and even externally with your customers. And again, Gmail, Google Docs, Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Word, Teams, etc. That list can go on. are powerful business tools designed to enhance collaboration and productivity. Great meetings are truly the bedrock of a thriving organization. But our data shows in today that employees expect, to be able to meet from anywhere, their office, their home, in a coffee shop, on the subway, you name it. And that's not the problem. The problem right now is since February of, 2 years ago, the average Microsoft Team user saw 252% increase in their weekly meeting time. The number of weekly meetings have increased by 153%. And that's still not actually the problem. But what I'm getting to is nearly half of the respondents to a survey that we ran relayed that they frequently share confidential and sensitive information via Teams, via email, via these applications that we've adopted to collaborate within. And again, 51%, they agreed that they are often sending business critical documents and data through these channels, which, again, it's great that your teams are collaborating, but kind of going back to that initial slide and talking about how much data can be lost through SaaS applications, through accidental deletions, misconfigurations. What are we accounting for? How are we protecting our data to make sure we're not losing those integral pieces of the puzzle? And again, according to Statistica, as of this year, over 60% of corporate data is stored in the cloud. And the 2022, Thales cloud security study found that 45% of organizations surveyed have experienced a data breach involving data in the cloud. Again, data loss in cloud applications is not rare or unheard of, and it can occur due to several reasons. Human error is honestly one of the biggest ones that we see. Employees inevitably delete the wrong email, or they delete a contact, or maybe there's a document that they have access to that they click on the wrong button, and before they know it, they can't find it again. Microsoft, what they kind of put into play, they will honor your deletion request without any question. They have no way of knowing if it was a hasty or malicious request, and they are not responsible for any unexpected results, which we'll get into that here in a little bit later on. But another big issue that we see, or another common cause of data loss, programmatic errors, otherwise known as those sync errors. Those powerful tools that are designed to streamline our business processes can ruin critical data in a flash with no undo. I think we've all been sitting there at some point, whether you were working on a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation, and you swear you have the document saved somewhere, and all of a sudden the application crashes, or you click on something and it's no longer on your screen, you can't find anything again. That's a programmatic error. Sometimes we lose a lot of hours worth of work when something like that does occur. The other side of things, and another very common cause of data loss, of course, hackers, cyber criminals, malicious actors. And whether that's through technical means or something like social engineering, aggressive individuals and even cyber hacking organizations are constantly inventing new tactics to get to our data. And then, of course, probably roll this up under human error, but something that we also see are malicious staff members, employees taking action as they're leaving an organization. Maybe something occurred within management, or maybe they were doing something at work that they weren't supposed to be doing. So they go in and wipe out all of their email, or they delete certain documents so you don't have access to those resources anymore. And then, of course, one of the other big things that we see, of course, something like malware, viruses, or ransomware. Beyond the typical cyber attack, these forms of, intentional extortion are becoming increasingly aggressive and expensive for businesses to go through. And when you do go through something like ransomware, there's a large chance you are not going to get all of your data back at the end of the day. Again, of course, there are other ways that data can be lost, but these traditionally are some of the most common causes that we see from our perspective. And when it comes to using these SaaS applications, of course, we trust applications like Microsoft and what G Suite has to offer. But again, there is no doubt that SaaS applications provide users access to powerful tools to enhance productivity and collaboration. Undoubtedly, SaaS application solutions offer multiple benefits to businesses, both on the large and small scale. But despite all the benefits that SaaS applications have, the risk of losing data in the cloud remains. We also know our staff will share our sensitive data via things like Teams and emails. And some of that sensitive data that we see being shared are things like customer records, financial details, employee records, goodness, things like social security numbers. And the problem is, many organizations don't stop and ask themselves, well, we need to use these applications. We need to share this information to do our jobs. How are we protecting this data? And we often take it for granted that this information is automatically backed up somewhere and that this data is protected as part of maybe some package that we do have through Microsoft or that we do have through G Suite. And again, there is that assumption that those two organizations are automatically doing something to protect our information. And that isn't truly the case. Most folks often forget that Office 365 is actually a communication solution rather than a data protection service. Microsoft, and again, along with a lot of other SaaS vendors that are out there, have a shared responsibility concept within their contract that implies that data protection and obligations are divided between Microsoft and Microsoft 365 users. Microsoft 365 does offer native backup protection features, but those features are not substitutes for an actual backup solution. Microsoft takes on the role of updating their applications, their infrastructure, but your business is accountable for backing up its critical business data that you're sharing within that application, including data in Office 365 applications, emails, images that you have in there, information on spreadsheets, presentations you've made in PowerPoint, and any other important documents that are critical to your business's function. Most software as a service companies, again, operate under the shared responsibility model, which we'll talk about a little later on. But again, in the shared responsibility model, the SaaS provider and the customer will each be responsible for various components that make up the service. Typically, that SaaS provider, they'll be responsible for things under their control, such as, again, that physical infrastructure, something that happens within their actual environment, and the infrastructure, again, itself. But the client is responsible for transporting and securing the data as part of using that offering. Now, on this next slide, we just kind of pulled out some different quotes and things that we have seen in SLAs and the business agreements that these large organizations offer. And with businesses increasingly relying on the SaaS solution for that day-to-day operations, and data loss and downtime, those are two things that can severely impact an organization. We want to help companies keep their data safe and keep their data intact when they need to. And Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce again provide some native basic functionality to help customers protect their data. There are significant gaps that need to be addressed. In Microsoft's service level agreement, it states that we recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services or are storing using a third-party application and service. Google also has it clearly worded, they have limited recovery. You have a limited time from when the data was permanently deleted to restore those files and messages. After that, the data cannot be recovered and it is gone forever. Again, Microsoft, Google, and Salesforce, they operate like data centers with world-class disaster recovery capabilities to protect from infrastructure threats like hardware and software failure. as power outages and things like natural disasters. But again, although that these SaaS providers are responsible for fixing issues that arise due to inadequacies on their end, they're not responsible for data loss, downtime, or things that could occur due to human mistakes, programmatic errors, or insider activities or cyber threats on our end. Now, just to help kind of draw that clear line in the sand where a vendor's responsibility, like Microsoft Office 365, ends and our responsibility begins as a business owner. You know, Microsoft's primary responsibility is focused on their global infrastructure and their commitment to millions, even billions of customers to keep this infrastructure up and running consistently, delivering time reliability of their cloud services, and again, enabling the productivity of users across the globe. An organization's responsibility is to have complete access and control of their data, regardless of where it resides. This responsibility doesn't magically disappear just because an organization made a business decision to utilize something like Microsoft Office 365. And again, it's not that Microsoft doesn't provide some level of data protection, but your data is extremely valuable to your business continuity, and you need to ensure that it's protected from any and all potential deletions or undesirable modifications. And when businesses use any sort of SaaS application, again, they operate under that shared responsibility model, which means the security of your vital data is in the cloud, is in the partnership between you and your cloud service provider. SaaS vendors like Microsoft, Google, and Salesforce are responsible for applications uptime, making sure that we can get into those programs when we need them to. Businesses using SaaS apps must realize that if anybody with valid credentials take action, SaaS vendors, again, like Microsoft, Google, and Salesforce, these are the processors, and they will view the request as a legitimate thing and process it. What this means is any SaaS provider will add, delete, or modify data requests based off the context of the action, whether it's accidental, malicious, fraudulent, and it does not matter if valid credentials authenticate the command, including the programmatic and scripting errors. What does this mean in layman's terms? This means if a cyber criminal gets a hold of employees' credentials and start to delete or move things around, that Microsoft isn't responsible because those actions were done using legitimate credentials. Same thing if a disgruntled employee does the same thing. And this is usually where companies find themselves in hot water if they haven't got a proper backup solution in place, because those emails, that data, those spreadsheets that could contain sensitive information, they're gone. And Microsoft and Google, they're not going to bring that information back for you. Now, as depicted in the Microsoft Office 365 shared responsibility outline that they have in their contract, the customer is responsible for the information and the data that is stored within Office 365. And for example, for additional backup protection, Microsoft can only retrieve data deleted within the 14-day retention period, showing you how to import and protect its data. Additionally, it needs to meet the retention requirements identified by your organization. And with the increase in the remote workforce and the amount of data being shared and utilized in all these different applications like email, OneDrive, SharePoint, goodness, Teams, it's critical that this data is not forgotten about, especially as it relates to the data protection and even any sort of compliance regulations that we must adhere to as a business. And we've talked about, it isn't just Microsoft that follows this shared responsibility model. Almost every SaaS provider out there follows a similar model and shares the responsibility of making sure your data is secure, and without proper backup, that data is extremely vulnerable. Now, kind of thinking through things, we've talked about, why we're moving to more SaaS-based applications. We're talking about how our data can be lost, but let's talk about how we can protect ourselves. Aside from, peace of mind, having a reliable backup in place can minimize any sort of downtime, financial losses while offline, especially in heavily regulated industries. Coming back online quickly means fewer unsatisfied or lost customers and less lost revenue due to downtime that could occur. Being able to come back quickly to retrieve data from cloud backups means a strengthened business continuity and less time, rebuilding and rebooting hardware, or again, looking for the traditional backup methods like disks, reinstalling everything from scratch, and then, of course, going through that testing process. Now, every business must meet legal compliance requirements relevant to its location, where you're located geographically, or could be what state you're located in, to ensure that continuous information does stay secure. Organizations in the United States must adhere to regulation requirements like what's outlined in things like HIPAA or CMMC. If you house any sort of information, European countries, you must adhere to the GDPR regulation itself. And additionally, in order to meet backup requirements for things like cyber insurance coverage, an organization, they must have a robust backup and recovery plan in place. And this plan must be well documented, regularly tested to ensure that it's effective in the event that a data breach does occur or some sort of security incident. The insurer then will also require proof that the organization has implemented adequate security measures to protect its data, including encryption and other security controls. But again, businesses are required to store financial data for reporting and possible court cases. Some businesses are also mandated to notify the appropriate authorities when they may delete data. And if you have ever deleted your legal compliance files and it's too late to recover them, and you can only restore your information from prior backups, Microsoft makes it very clear in the Office 365 Trust Center that their role is that of the data processor. This drives their focus on data security, and you can see it on their site that they have a great list of industry certifications. And even though your data resides within Office 365, an IT's organization, or your responsibility as an organization who owns that data, is still to make sure that it's protected and compliant to whatever regulation or cyber insurance policy that you may be a part of. And this responsibility, again, comes with all the external pressures of your industry, the compliance demands, and even your internal employees to make sure that their data does remain secure. Now, just kind of keeping on that topic of compliance, this is one thing I always joke about. Not since the debate over who came first, the chicken or the egg, has a topic so thoroughly bewildered and confused the masses as the topic of email backup versus email archiving. Now, if you've been listening to me go on this whole time and thinking, goodness, we archive our emails, we're good. Listen up. This is for you. You're asking yourself whether you need email backup or an email archiving system. There's a really simple answer. You need both. George Crump, he's the president of a storage organization called Storage in Switzerland. He summarizes the difference between email backup and email archive quite well. Backups are primarily used for operational recoveries to quickly recover an overwritten file or a corrupted database that maybe somebody's trying to put ransomware on. The focus is on speed to both backup and recover and that data integrity. Archives, on the other hand, they typically store a version of that file that's no longer changing or shouldn't be changed. Boiled down to the absolute basics, you could say that email backup is purely for the purposes of something like disaster recovery, while email archiving is about the legal preservation and compliance. Based off of these needs, we see that there are 4 key attributes that differentiate that archive from backup. From an archive perspective, it's a static point in time. Like we said, it's a document that you're not going to change. So it's not going to be a PowerPoint presentation. It's not going to be a Word document that you get lost. And something like an email is a little challenging. Something that is another attribute of the archive process. It's snapshot and replicas. There's no metadata here. And metadata, again, could be something in an email, which is the sender, the receiver, the route that email took, the time it was sent, and more. Archives, it's good if you have to search through. You need to do a broad search through documents. It's an easy process to get through to the resources that you need. And again, it's designed for that legal hold or that e-discovery, that process. Now, the attributes of backup, it's dynamic and it's changeable resource. So if you need a file that, again, disappears, you're working on something, it just goes away, you can pull that up back open with backup and continue where you left off. These are at any point in time copies, and they do include metadata. So metadata, again, could be something in that email, such as when it was sent, the receiver, the route it took, the time, and again, more about that message that we could change and update and tell a story with. Backup, again, enables a faster restoration, and it's designed for that recovery and business continuity. Again, boiled back to the basics, the absolute basics, you could say that email backup is purely for the purposes of disaster recovery, while email archiving is about the legal preservation and compliance. And there's certainly something great about both of those. Now, of course, the other thing to consider when looking at backup solutions is that data protection has 2 facets to it. One is focused on protecting the data behind things like encryption, firewall, employee trainings, regular audit. And the other side of data protection is focused on recovering data quickly and easily with minimal negative impact on business continuity. Again, the 2 leading SaaS application providers, Office 365 and Google Workspace, they don't offer native recovery options that are robust and easy for businesses to use. Microsoft 365, it does have a recycling bin, but this isn't a reliable option for recovering deleted files. You know how easy it is to go in and clear out a recycling bin? And when you do that, those files, you can't recover them. Deleting items purged from the Exchange online recycling bin are unrecoverable after 14 to 30 days, depending on the settings that you have in place. SharePoint and OneDrive for businesses, files are unrecoverable after only 93 days. Files that are permanently deleted by users in any Microsoft 365 application are immediately unrecoverable. Finally, combing through the recycling bin to find the exact file to restore it, it can cost you so much time and mental health by going through that process. And the last thing, you ever have to go through the unfortunate event of ransomware, ransomware attackers, they block access to files, folders, and devices using strong, unbreakable encryption. Then they demand payments for, any key files to get those back unencrypted. And recovering from an attack requires several techniques and procedures to bring on mission critical systems back online. So having something like a comprehensive data backup and disaster recovery plan is vital to ensuring and recovering successfully from something like a ransomware attack. And cyber criminals and their tactics, they're consistently evolving, making them even more sophisticated and dangerous. Now, something to think about. A couple great things to think about when evaluating working with a company to help you with your SaaS environments and making sure that that data does stay backup. Make sure that you find a vendor who is just as concerned with the compliance aspect of things as you are. A data retention policy enables businesses to manage their compliance with industry guidelines and regulations. And something I always tell to folks in settings like this is, let's say that we're a retail store And let's say we have a consumer. Joe, he bought a pair of jeans from our retail business 10 years ago, and we've added Joe's information into our database. In the 10 years that followed, Joe might have moved between 20 states, or maybe he'd even moved to a different country. The jeans that Joe bought from us 10 years ago, they probably don't fit him anymore. Maybe Joe doesn't even wear those jeans anymore. Maybe he donated them many moons. But it's safe to say the information that we've collected on Joe has a value to it, to our business, compared to the risk of losing that data to a hacker, right? I mean, Joe hasn't bought from us in a long time, but maybe we still have that credit card information on file. And that's something that a hacker would want to get their hands on. IT managers and companies are faced with the question, what do we do with it? What do we not do with it? How long do we store it for? And generally, the need to retain data, again, is based off of the compliance laws that we're subject to. But we also, to bring some sanity to your data management, folks should follow a written data retention policy and implement it across the organization. A retention policy clarifies what data should be stored, archived, or, where that should happen for how long. Once a data set completes its retention period, it can then be deleted or moved to historical data or a secondary site or secondary backup, whatever we need to do, depending on the requirements that we set forth. And because this is smart, streamlined, data retention policies offer great benefits so you can avoid great loss. Because if you were to go through something like a data breach, you have to report that you lost Joe's credit card information, even though he hasn't shopped with you in a decade. So making sure that you have that written plan in place that talks to you about how long you need to have that data and what you need to do to get rid of it, it certainly can help as a key part of the process. And of course, some of the other key features and benefits that you want to think about when evaluating backup solutions, something that offers automated backup, non-destructive for things like SharePoint, OneDrive, OneDrive for businesses, Teams, mail, calendar, contacts, goodness, the list goes on and on. You want a solution that recovers backups using a granular point-in-time restore points that preserve folder structure. You want to look for a company or a solution provider that offers cross-user restore and enables admin to restore data into another user's account, which I have a story about that I'll share here in a moment. And you, of course, also want to find a solution that does SharePoint online backups, restores for all the documents across teams, group sites, collaboration, all that good stuff. And you also want to look for somebody that does reporting with immutable audit logs, plus actionable reports of every backup. That way, if you do need to provide documentation to an auditor, something like a cyber liability insurance policy, you have any sort of audit logs or information that they may be asking for. And the other thing that I would say is big when it comes to a cloud backup service is unlimited storage at the data centers around the world, providing scalability and, again, governance compliance when it comes to housing your data themselves. Now, here we get to a little bit of the fun part of the presentation. I have a couple stories that I always like to share when it comes to just cloud backup and other things that we've heard occurring in the space. Now, accidental deletion happens more often than people think. This is very true. We see it firsthand almost on a daily basis. And losing data is easy to do and hard to recover from, is what I always tell folks. Now, data loss isn't just, let's say, an old ghost story, but I wanted to share a few tales from what I always call the dark web. Halloween happens once a year, and it wasn't that long ago. But unlike the urban legends that visits our thoughts around that time of year, SaaS data losses, it's no myth. Even though you won't find anybody huddled over a campfire hanging on to every ghastly word of the tale of the missing email or the sync that destroyed the customer database, But I think we all know that feeling of losing again a Word document that you've been working on for hours, or trying to move a file for it to never be found again. And sync problems are so pervasive that Google has a dedicated help page for sync errors alone. And Steve Simons, the director of IT and senior cloud architect at AMAG Pharmaceuticals, tells in some gruesome detail how a data sync failure with a shared folder gave his HR department a big fright. An HR folder was moved from within a Google Drive and it had not synced properly. As a result, all of the files within that folder disappeared, including some that weren't even owned by the user moving the folder itself. The employee checked the trash bin, the recycling bin, and the desktop for a copy, but that data was gone. They couldn't locate it anywhere, and because that sync didn't correctly occur, there were no backup files that they could look at. Luckily, Simons, not long before that, had implemented a backup for Google Workspace, a cloud backup solution. And when the company transitioned to the cloud, this disaster was then averted because they were able to go back to that solution. The team members were able to restore that missing data, so the headache was averted. But on the other hand, if this wasn't and they weren't able to restore that missing data, because it was an HR folder, it had social security numbers in it. And that was going to be an incident that they had to report because as a pharmaceuticals organization, they have to be HIPAA compliant. And even though it happened to their own employees, it was still a loss of data and a process that they were going to have to go through. So luckily, that cloud backup application, they were able to get a copy of the files that they could edit, change, and get back up to date and running just as quick as possible. Now, on the other side of things, we had talked about cross-user restores. It's one of the big things that you want to think about when evaluating a backup solution. And you may think that a small business without many employees, it's unlikely something like this would happen to you. But we see data loss again happening at companies of every size. A woman that was previously a director of a company she had since resigned, told police that she had been angry with the director that she worked with, or a former business associate of hers, when she had left the company. This former director of the company knew the password to the main company's email account and used this to access and force a password reset for the Dropbox for Business account where this company held a lot of its documentation, including payroll details, design, print material, customer records, so on and so forth. Over a period of about 5 to 6 hours on a bank holiday, she used her unauthorized administrative access to permanently delete every single file that company had, which was over 5,000 documents in this Dropbox for Business account. To do so, she had removed all other users' access to the documents and then deleted them, and then removed the files from the trash folder so that they were permanently deleted. The person responsible for the attack, of course, they pled guilty to 3 Computer Misuse Acts offenses, and they were sentenced to an 18-month community order and 18 hours of community service. But unfortunately, that 60-person company that this occurred at, they were unable to recover from the incident, and they had to close their doors because of it. And the moral of both of these stories is around, again, what steps we be taking as business owners to prevent something similar from happening in our business. Back up your important data. Make sure that those backups are recent and can be restored, and that those are files that you can make changes and edits to in the future. Make sure that those solutions that you choose have things like cross-user restore points as well, and that they also keep something like compliance in mind, because again, that's what helps our business continuity. And with 45% of organizations experiencing data loss in the cloud, having that trusted enterprise-ready backup solution for something like Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, It's now more important than ever. Phishing, account takeovers, and ransomware. These are all things and terminology that we hear about in our local news and our national news when we turn it on. And ransom demands have increased 144% over the last 2 years, indicating that increased successes and confidence among these threat actors are really taking speed. Our backup for things like Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, and Salesforce, it protects your organization from the inevitable human error, configuration and sync errors, malware, ransomware, and other threats by automatically backing up your SaaS data daily. With this enterprise grade, robust backup and recovery capabilities, it protects your data from costly and catastrophic data loss. It empowers easy to use capabilities. It empowers companies and end users to get their data back the way it was in just a few clicks. And really, I always say, test the difference yourself. Now, goodness, some folks may want to close their ears, especially the more technical folks, but if you haven't already, you or somebody on your team should test the time it takes to restore data lost from your current solution. One simple way to do this: delete 5 emails you might be comfortable losing. Please make sure these aren't sensitive emails, but delete those emails from the recycling bin or the trash can then. And then try to restore them into the same folder just the way they were previously, with that same metadata, subject line, tags, whatever they had. If the effort is painful and slow, even with the archive tool, or it takes your organization much longer than you anticipated, a solution like ours can help around that backup and may even be better suited for your organization to help with that business continuity moving forward. And from that point, like I said, please don't delete emails that you aren't comfortable with losing, but just see how long it takes you to recover those and if you are able to recover them. And goodness, of course, if there are any questions as a part of this process, we always love to talk folks about their security, about their own business continuity and their cloud backup solutions. So if you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But
Yeah, that's great,
goodness.
bro. Yeah, that really great delivery, Katie. You hit a lot of highness. I wasn't. I know we went through the slide deck ahead of time, but really good test of people's recovery by deleting some emails and seeing where that goes. As a side tangent, if it's that important, I'm sure the other person will email you, but no, follow Katie's direction, not mine. I did have a question from someone I was speaking to, who had a question in terms of backup. They're on Office 365. The obvious question from them was where to start, because they already thought that was kind of included within Office 365. What's your advice on kind of where they start? It's not something you can just pick up the phone and call Microsoft for, right? And say, hey, I need or Google. So they were curious as to where to start. I mean, obviously we can help them, but for most people like him tend to feel that it was already included. But where's a good starting point, you think, for folks, looking to kind of close the loop on this?
Yeah, for those folks looking to close the loop, reaching out to somebody like a managed service provider or a company that does provide backup solutions and just starting to have a conversation. Those organizations, they're familiar with what's included in Microsoft's terms, and he shouldn't feel alone. A lot of folks feel like some of this functionality should be built into their offering, but get in touch to, again, a cloud backup provider and start having a conversation with them. Maybe they'll go through something like a risk assessment with you where they'll figure out what you have in place, maybe some of those gaps that are living. And then, of course, we'll be able to provide you the right solution from there, because you also need to understand if you are up against something like CMMC or you have a cyber liability insurance policy, we want to make sure whatever next steps are taken align with those as well.
Yep. Yeah. Solid advice. And we can email you if I can't figure out my email, if I delete 5 of them, we can email you, right? If we can't get them back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Like I said, I did give the
You did.
disclaimer,
It was a
and this is a
disclaimer.
recorded
Yes.
event to
Yes.
not do it with the emails.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not an attorney. This isn't legal advice, or in this case, it isn't technical advice. But again, it's things like that are a valuable exercise. The education today is valuable because a lot of times we don't find out what it looks like until we're there, right? So I think that's kind of your narrative around it. Having people test that. That's great advice, and I didn't see that coming. I think we no further questions. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. For the what we'll do is we'll post a link to this webinar on our LinkedIn page for people to check out. We make all of our webinars available to everyone via our Educate channel on YouTube for those that could attend to rewatch and to share with those that maybe couldn't make it. So that link will go up tomorrow on our own company page. Katie, I appreciate the insight. I hope that everyone that was in attendance today got some insight and value out of today's session. And like I said, appreciate your time, appreciate the energy during the presentation, and it's great to have you along. Look forward to doing another one with you real soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Like I said, I'm always happy to come in here and just talk about this because, goodness, our business landscape changes so often, especially within the last 2 to 3 years. We almost need to evaluate our data, how it's flowing, and how we can recover from certain incidences. So we certainly appreciate you having us.
Yep, that's great. All right, for everyone that joined us, appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and again, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.